So what everybody knows is in March, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, reached an agreement to resolve nationwide claims that were brought by home sellers. So, in an effort to clear some of these things up, can you explain to us what is this NAR settlement?
So the NAR settlement is basically they want more transparency between buyers, sellers, and real estate agents and brokers. They've come to an agreement to where now on the way we view a property, when we're working with a client, there's two major changes that are happening. So before we work with a buyer, we have to have an agreement signed with a buyer, and that agreement has to state what our services are, what we're charging, and be very specific and very transparent on if the seller's not paying a commission, the buyer will be responsible for the difference. That's always been in the past a little bit different. Agents could view on the MLS what the seller was willing to pay and another brokerage for bringing a buyer to the table, and that agreement was always between the listing agent and the seller. Mm-hmm. So it was actually the listing agent's brokerage paying the buying agent's brokerage. Mm-hmm. So that is going to be eliminated if the agreement gets approved in the summertime as expected. So it's created a lot of confusion really in the markets. And from buyers are thinking one thing, they're hearing one thing in the news. Sellers are thinking one thing, they're going to save all this money. Buyers agents, some of them are confused, or are they even going to have a job at the end of the summer? So there's a lot of confusion and not a whole lot of clarity. And even we don't even know exactly what's going to happen, but those are the two major changes that are expected to happen.
Right. And when you say buyer's representation agreements, isn't that something that could have always been done or should have always been done in the past anyways? So what's the story there?
Absolutely. So, one of the first things they teach you when you get a real estate license is best practices. Best practices, real estate agents should have already been getting a buyer's agency agreement signed, explaining to the buyer. But in reality, I think the majority of agents never got that signed. They were just expectation was they're going to get paid. They'll get it signed when they need to get signed for compliance issues. But now they're going to have it signed before they meet with the buyer and show them properties. Mm-hmm. But yeah, best practices has always been there. So if you're a real estate agent and you're worried about what's going to happen to you, my advice is just to get better at what you do, be very knowledgeable about how you present and what it means and the value that you bring to the table. Like what is your value proposition that you're working with a buyer? Explain to them why they need to use you, how it can benefit them, and just be very, again, transparent on how the system works, how it's gonna benefit them from using a brokerage, how you can help them through negotiations. An example, so many things can happen if you're just working off intermediary, right? And if they say they don't need buyer's agents anymore, right? So that's what we've been hearing from people, and that's going away. You just contact the listing agent. They show the property. Listing agent represents the seller. So many things can go sour in the process of a transaction. When I say sour, it's usually what we are is, I tell people all the time, we're licensed real estate agents, but at the same time, we're unlicensed therapists. Mm-hmm. And we help mediate and get the buyers and sellers, where it works for both of them.
Well, it's a stressful thing, right? Selling and buying really the largest asset probably for most people, and there's a lot that goes into that, and it can make it uneasy. So therapy needed sometimes, absolutely.
There is, and there's an art to it. A good real estate agent knows how to look in everybody's best interest.
Right.
And what we are is a good medium. We negotiate for our client in their best interest. That's for the buying side. Listing agents negotiate for their sellers. And we try to find a good medium where it's just in both of their best interests, as we're acting as fiduciaries. And and then that's what I found, that when people say, you only need one agent now, and it's going to save the seller just tons of money, and then the values of the houses are going down. I heard that the other day. That's not true. At the end of the day, it's supply and demand. Right now we have a supply and demand imbalance. And from what everybody's saying, it's going to be like that for quite some time, most likely. And the way the conditions are in the market with interest rates, people are kind of locked in, they're not moving, sellers aren't. So you're going to have that less supply to continue. And yeah.
Well, I mean, if I was a seller, I would be probably nervous about a buyer coming wanting to possibly buy my home, but they don't understand the process. They don't know what to look for. They don't know what guidance to get, and so I would be worried it would end up kind of like a Facebook marketplace situation where we get all the way to the closing table and they change their mind, or any number of things that could happen, right? Because they don't have the help from a buyer's agent to tell them, hey, you should get pre-approval. Here's how you determine how much your house is worth, how much you can afford to buy, and how to line up your finances and make sure that throughout this process you don't kick yourself out of qualifying for this home, and all of those different things. And it would also prevent you from having people that are looking at your $500,000 home that can only afford a $250,000 home, and then it just being a waste of everybody's time, right? So, there's a lot of misunderstandings, I think, about what has happened here. So from the buyers and sellers perspective, what do you think are some of the biggest misunderstandings surrounding it? Because, like, for instance, I got a text from a friend of mine the other day. They were like, hey, you're a realtor, you're not getting paid anymore, right? And I'm like, no, that's not quite right. So there's some things like that out there. So what are some of the biggest ones you've heard?
I think one of the biggest ones to touch back on it is really sellers think they're going to be saving that 3%. And now they're not going to have to pay a buyer's agent. At the end of the day, sellers want buyer's agents to bring their buyers they need as much exposure as they can. Buyer's agents, they market to find buyers. A good buyer's agent, it's a benefit to the seller by having the buyer's agents bring in their clients, right? So I think that's one big misunderstanding is, yes, you do not have to pay a buyer's agent. It's going to go away on the MLS. That's completely up to the seller if they want to pay it, and then it'll be up to the listing agent to work with a buyer's agent off that negotiation. But it's not going to save the seller any money. So it's just not going to, and that's my opinion. But at the end of the day, I think also a lot of it depends on how the markets are, right? The last 2 or 3 years, if you were a seller, it's been in your favor. Put a sign in the yard, sometimes it did sell itself, right? Multiple offers. I think when you get into a different environment, a lot of that will also change. You won't care so much about the bottom dollar. You're going to need as much exposure as you can to sell the house if you need to move.
Right.
And and I think for buyers, there's so many. The confusion part of it is, who do I think it's going to hurt the most? Like if everything were to happen the way it's being presented through the media, and we're going to say $30 billion to homeowners this year in real estate after this gets approved, is first-time home buyers, they're cash strapped a lot of times. And buyers don't like to pay for stuff that they don't have to pay for. And, if you meet with a buyer and you say, well, I'm going to show this, but I have an agreement with you, and if the seller's not paying, you have to pay me. Are you willing to do that? And a lot of them aren't financially capable of doing that. And so there'll be different types of negotiations. So seller, you don't pay the 3% commission, but you do it on a concession. I mean, that's going to be another art, another style that agents will have to be willing to adapt to. And myself included, like we're all learning on the fly on this. It was presented, it was announced to us. We kind of knew it was coming. People that researched it were paying attention to it. But it all happened like overnight, and it was just boom. And
it was a Friday, right?
It was a Friday.
My phone blew up Saturday morning.
Yeah, mine too, from agents saying, tell me what's going on. We have to dig into it and figure it out too. And quite honestly, there's still a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense in it.
Sure.
You get everything from relocation to leases to, so there's going to be a lot more clarity in the near future. And so it's hard to even talk about exactly what's going to happen, but the way it's being presented right now and the way that's written in the settlement is those are the two biggest changes. Basically, have to have a buyer's agreement before you meet with client, and the seller's not going to be, or the agency's not going to be required to, or they won't be allowed to put it on the MLS showing what the seller's willing to pay or the broker's willing to pay the commission to the buying agent.
Sure. And I think too that this forces buyers agents to provide a little bit more clarity on what exactly is it that I am doing for you, right? Because as a buyer, if I'm going to buy a home, if I'm going to invest that much money and do something that important, like I wouldn't, I wouldn't want an unqualified attorney representing me in court. I wouldn't want to buy a vehicle and not have a licensed mechanic look at it to make sure it's okay, right? So like that representation is still really critical. It's just a matter of who's paying for that representation. But I think that if a buyer agent is worth what they're asking for, then the buyers should absolutely receive everything that they're paying for, and they're going to have an easier process. They're going to have more understanding. They're going to have confidence that they bought a home that's in good shape, that they know all of the ins and outs about it, because that's what the agent does. Right? Yeah.
There's so many things. I mean, there's what they're not taught, what people aren't saying is it can be anything from an encroachment on a survey. Like, well, how would you handle that? How would you negotiate that if the buyer orders a survey for the property, they're unrepresented, they've never dealt with that before, and then let's say there's a fairly inexperienced listing agent on the other side, and there's an encroachment. Let's say there's a gas line going through the middle of the backyard, and that that the buyer is going to put a pool in. Like, they're going to put a pool in. That's one thing they want, one of their criteria. Well, how do you know if you can put a pool in? By looking at the encroachment. Let's say that the fence is over the property line when you're looking at a survey. These are just some minor things that happen a lot in real estate, and if you've never dealt with them. Say the fence line's over, the neighbor's got it on the property line. What do? It's encroaching. How do you negotiate that with a seller? How do you have that conversation saying, no, I want it moved back on the other side, or you need to go negotiate something with the neighbor? Like, we got to figure this out. In my experience, not everybody's a real estate agent. You have engineers, they think one way. You have people in sales, they think one way. It's our job as a good buying agent, a realtor, to negotiate that, know all the ins and outs, be very knowledgeable about what you're doing, but also explain it on how this is, what our options are. And if you don't have that representation, you're not going to know what the options are. And a lot of deals are going to fall apart, and there's going to be lots of lawsuits because of it.
Yeah, and not only that, how do you know what a good offer is? If you don't have an agent helping you, look at comps, what's sold, what's for sale now. That's a lot of legwork to have to try and do by yourself, and then you're still going to probably come up with incorrect numbers if you don't know where to look, right? And so how do you properly negotiate a home if you don't have somebody helping you and doing it on your behalf, right? So there's still tons of reasons why a buyer's agent is absolutely a necessity in the transaction. And I think you said earlier, especially for first-time home buyers, that's added costs potentially, but a qualified buying agent should be able to come up with ways to alleviate some of these costs, even though the process at its core really hasn't changed that much. It's just kind of how it's done now, So those costs, those fees, they're all going to be there somewhere, somehow.
Well, and again, it comes back to know your value. Do I think that there's inexperienced real estate agents out there that people don't have a lot of respect for because they had a bad experience? Absolutely, there's been an excess, no doubt about it.
Right.
I think that this is going to be more of a skill-based market, which it should be. And I also think that everybody that's negative about it, you better embrace it. And it's going to be, ultimately, it can be good for the business. And that's how we're approaching it with our brokerage. That's how, when I talk to an agent, I'm like, look, it's done. Should have been doing some of this stuff anyways. Transparency in business is good for business.
Yeah, and on that note, so like, how do you see this changing the market? Like, so what could the potential benefits of this be for both sides, for agents and for buyers and sellers?
It'll just be a lot of the excess. You had a little bit, anytime business is good, and that's what it's been for the last, 7 years. It's just been so good, and you know, it was easy to get a buyer, and you just got under contract, and it was about volume and volume and volume. And I think that there's a lot of unprofessionalism in the business. And I know from hearing some of the questions and some of the complaints that I've seen through the industry, you know, some stuff my 9-year-old will know how to answer. And there was an agent with a real estate license out there negotiating $1 million deal. I think a lot of that will disappear. So I think for the industry, it will be good. And it won't feel like it in the beginning. There's going to be some changes that we have to adapt to. But a true professionalism, we'll learn how to adapt, and they'll thrive off that. So you're going to have some agents that are going to use this as an excuse to leave the business, which are probably in reality already struggling anyways. And then you're going to have some agents that are going to take the opportunity and thrive with it. They're going to learn how to adapt with it. The ones that are knowledgeable, that have been going and learning skills for these years, or as a new agent, learning a skill now because you want to be a really good real estate agent. The skilled agents will thrive in this kind of environment, and that's where we're going at, and then it's coming. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know how to have those conversations, if you're a real estate agent, listen to this. You need to be studying your scripts, know your value proposition, be knowledgeable about the ins and the outs of the business, everything from lending to showing houses, explaining encroachments, explaining the agreements, exactly how representation works for the listing side and the buying side. If you're really completely thinking that the buyer's agents are going away, get good at getting listings. Go be a listing specialist and focus on that, which, you know, the way we've always taught it is the money's in the listings anyways. Mm-hmm. You know, it always has been. Leads, listings, and leverage. And we're just kind of going back to that. And, you know, so if you're worried about buyer's agents disappearing at all, which they're not, but if you're worried about that, learn how to get listings. And that could be something that you can improve on anyways.
Yeah, and ask yourself, if you're worried about buyer's agency going away, what should you be doing that would keep that from happening for you, mm-hmm. right? What's the difference between you and somebody else who's willing to give up just because they have to present their own value?
Yep.
Really, because that's what it is. You're telling a buyer and a seller, and you're saying, hey, here's what I'm going to do for you. Here's all of the reasons why I'm worth whatever this amount of money is.
Yep.
And if you don't do that effectively, they'll just say no thanks. And, you know, a good buyer's agent will be able to do that. So I think that this is something good for buyers, because now they're almost essentially, you know, forced to qualify the agent that they're working with. It's not just like, hey, could you show me this house? It's like, hey, I need to pick somebody that really understands what's going on to show me homes, right? And so having a certain level of peace that, you know, at the very least, the agent knew what they were doing. They know about this settlement. They knew to get you to sign an agreement, which should tell you that they're plugged in to what should be appropriately happening, you know, in a real estate transaction. And so they qualify themselves throughout that entire process for the buyer. So it should give the buyer more peace, which is great.
Yeah, and really when you think about it, on the flip side is if you're a listing agent and you're working with a seller, mm-hmm. The flip side of that is it was always more difficult to get a seller to work with you, because you had to really present, like, how are you going to market the property? How are you going to negotiate the sale of the property? And you had to really explain that side of it, right? And how, look, if you hire me as your real estate agent, the value that I'm going to bring can earn you much more money than the commission you're worried about paying.
Right.
And because I can negotiate, and my skills are where I can negotiate and bring more money for you and net you more money, and don't worry about the commission. Worry about how I'm going to work for you and what I can do for you to get the max value for the property. Yeah. Now we just have to do that on the buying side and flip over the script and say, let me negotiate for you. Let me tell you're worried about paying a commission. If the seller doesn't pay a commission, let me tell you why you need to hire me. And if you explain it like that, then and really show value and be true to your word, you won't have any issues in this market that's coming.
Yeah.
And I really firmly believe that, and I think it's going to be good for the industry. It won't feel like it in the beginning, but I think it will clean out. It's a business cycle, and it's going to clean out some of the excess in the business that weren't willing to learn the skills. And you're dealing with somebody's biggest investment, like you said, that they might ever purchase. And you should be very knowledgeable on when you're working with them on the buying or the selling side. 100%, you need to know the ins and outs of the business to protect your client's best interest. And this is just another way to improve on business.
Absolutely. So if you were a buyer or a seller watching this video, summarize what we just talked about in a few bullet points in terms of like, when trying to select a real estate agent, with all of these things that have come out of this NAR settlement, what should they be looking for to feel confident in who they've chosen?
I think a lot of it is experience. How can you help me? Why do I need you? If I'm a buyer, why do I need you? And you need to explain the value of and probably a list of problems and things that can arise. Give some real life examples of things that have happened in the past. Like, how would you handle that? And then you also have to tell them, like, we're a good medium. I'm a good communicator. And when I communicate a message to the listing agent or the seller, it has to come across in a certain way where we're trying to keep it in your best interest too. Keep the deal together and, not just ruffle feathers and be like, we're doing this or not. We're negotiators. We're trying to negotiate and we're problem solvers. I'm a great problem solver. When someone comes to me with a problem, I'm able to work through that problem and find the best solution. And I'm really good at what I do. You should work with me. And when you start presenting it like that, and don't worry so much about the money. I'm going to negotiate that where on the selling side, we're going to try to figure out negotiations on that. If I can't on that side, you're responsible for paying me this set amount that we're agreeing to now. And but let me tell you the value that I bring to the table, and then know your scripts, know your value. Everybody's different. I'm a good communicator. I talk to people, and then I want you to be my friend after this transaction's over with. I don't want to one and done, like we're out.
Right.
I want a relationship. I'm in the relationship business. And when you explain that to the client, a lot of people also want that, and they're like, oh, I trust this guy.
Sure.
And you want your clients to be able to trust you. How you present that, you have to come up with your own value proposition and be knowledgeable, be experienced, always learn something new, know market data. It changes really fast sometimes. Be up to date and give them numbers. Some people, it's very important, the numbers for everybody. Everything from buyers' net sheets, sellers' net sheets. These are things that we should have already been doing. It's just now you're going to have to do them.
Right. Yeah. And so it's really what it all boils down to when you're making a decision on who should be my real estate agent. Confidence, right? Knowing that I know the answers. Here's what I know that I will provide for you. And like you say, don't worry about the money. I'm going to try to get it somewhere else. But if I can, you're not even going to think twice about the money because of the level of experience that you're going to have working with me, right? And that's honestly the type of experience that buyer agent should have been delivering the entire time. And it's the ones that weren't that are going to fall off and leave room for, not just experienced great agents, but also great new and up-and-coming agents that are willing and able to go that extra mile for their clients. So.
And if you're a new agent starting fresh out there, go to all the classes, everything that's offered. There's so much. Like, we're so fortunate to have technology and where it is for training. And of course, our brokerage, we're built on training, and everybody knows that. And there's nothing wrong with saying it. We train good agents. We're good at what we do because the culture where our brokerage is, we believe in that. And are our agents scared? I've had other agents call me from different brokerages that are local recently after all this happened, and they were not happy with the message that was delivered to them. And I don't know how it was delivered. I don't say anything negative about anybody, but I know that ours is a positive message, and we're embracing it. We're going to embrace the change. And so we're looking forward to it. And I like change personally. I think it's good, and I think it's really good for business.
It means growth, right?
It means growth.
Yeah.
It means better. There's a reason that this got brought to attention and why it's happening. There's a lot of reasons that it happened. It wasn't just one thing. But at the end of the day, 99% of the real estate agents are already good real estate agents. And we've heard so much negativity in the news and from some sellers that had a bad experience with somebody. And then you have to explain to them, like, look, I'm sorry about that. But let me tell you what a good real estate agent can do for you. And quite at the end of the day, a good real estate agent is a really good communicator. And I will keep going back to that. That's the biggest thing when people ask me for advice. I'm like, communicate to your clients. Communicate to your clients so you won't hardly ever get fired. I mean, if it's in your control, if you answer your phone, and if you don't have an answer for them for their question right then, go get the answer and get back to them right away.
Right.
And if you communicate that, you will always be good in this business.
Yeah, and I can say from experience that, you know, you said two things: training, and then if you don't know the answer, finding the answer. And I can confidently say without any doubt that, you know, if the agent is a member of Keller Williams Northeast here in the Humble, Kingwood, Atascocita area in Houston, they're getting trained on how to handle all of these things appropriately. They're excited to do this training to figure out how to best serve their clients through this whole thing. And if there's a question that they don't know the answer to, they know that there is somebody here that does, and they will find it, and they will find it quickly. So, you know, people that are looking to buy or sell a home can absolutely come here with the utmost confidence that they're going to find an agent that is knowledgeable, that is able to get the answers that they need, and that's going to be able to, you know, make the home buying or selling process easy for whoever it is.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, it's about the experience.
Right.
And you'll have a good experience when you work with a well-qualified agent. And we want that experience to be a good experience, right? Nobody is, we try not to teach anybody, and we try not to communicate to anybody like we're just here for the commission. Like, it's not about that. Like, we want the experience to be good for the clients. That's the culture of our company and our brokerage. It starts with the leadership. It was the leadership that I learned from. It's a leadership that is going to come behind me. That's the way it's going to be years from now. And so I firmly believe in processes and systems, and we have them here, and not just here. Like, there's some great brokerages out there.
Sure.
I know what we have to offer. I was a baby agent with Keller Williams. I only know Keller Williams, and I love Keller Williams. But we also believe in the same ideas.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, you know, for sitting down and answering some of these questions, because I think it helps potential buyers and sellers understand things better. It helps agents understand things better, because this is all brand new, and like, just, you know, having a certain level of confidence and understanding that, like, everything's gonna be fine. Like, it's not the hair on fire emergency that some people want to, you know, make it out to be. People are still buying and selling homes. The market is still, you know, while it's not the best as it, you know, has been in recent years, it's still strong. You know, it's all relative, right? And so people are still moving, people are still buying and selling, you know, and now we just have to make sure that we are presenting all of the latest info in a way that makes everybody comfortable and understand the whole situation. So this was awesome. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Yep.
Perfect. Awesome.